Good morning. Welcome to Money and Mental Health's second online conference exploring how financial services firms can help to tackle gambling harms. I'm Helen Undy. I'm the Chief Executive of the Money and Mental Health Policy Institute. We're an independent charity committed to breaking the links between financial difficulty and mental health problems. We do that through carrying out research, developing practical policy solutions, and by working in partnership with both those providing solutions and those using them to find out what really works. And that's why we're here today. This work has been kindly funded by the Gambling Commission in support of the National Strategy to Reduce Gambling Harms. And today we're going to celebrate the progress that's been made by financial services firms over the last few years in tackling gambling harms, but we're also here to explore what's next for this sector, both in terms of opportunities, but also challenges. We're going to talk about how firms can strengthen support tools. We're going to talk about how we can use data and the voice of lived experience to better identify and support those at risk. And we're also going to explore the increasing overlap between gambling and other activities like gaming and investments. This is part of a broader programme of work at Money and Mental Health, including lots of workshops and seminars that many of the firms in the room will have been involved in, and the publication of our best practice guide for firms, which if we were in a real world conference, and wouldn't it be lovely if we were, I would say there are copies in reception for you to collect, but there actually are in our little virtual reception. So when you landed on Hop-In this morning, there is a reception area. If you go in there, you'll find our best practice guide that you can download and keep that will have lots of insights from our research, but also other organisations as well. As many of you will know, at Money and Mental Health, everything we do is underpinned by the lived experiences of those who've been through the challenges that we are trying to tackle. And when we've been looking into gambling and researching that area, some of those experiences have been particularly harrowing. For many people who struggle with gambling, it's a secret that they carry on their own, and the only people who know are the gambling companies and the financial services firms who see the money coming in or more often see the money going out. It's a secret that leaves many problem gamblers 8 times as likely to take their own life. And our new research, which is out later this month, has found that shockingly half of people with a gambling addiction have had suicidal thoughts or attempted to take their own life in the last 12 months. So this really matters. And while the financial services firms who see those payments coming in and out aren't the cause of the problem, firms have a really rare insight into what can be a very dangerous problem and have the power to be a really kind of powerful part of that solution in a way that not many other people or organisations can. So I'm absolutely delighted to welcome you all here today, and I'm thrilled to have such a brilliant lineup of speakers and also of attendees. You are all busy people, and we know that, and to give up a morning of your time is no small feat. There's, I think, about 240 of you registered to attend this morning, and we're here for 3.5 hours. That's over 800 hours of thinking time being invested by really smart and committed people who are in a position to make a difference on this issue. That is a huge investment. I was thinking this morning, I don't know if anyone else remembers the slightly strange tool that Twitter introduced a couple of years ago called Thunderclap. The idea was that lots of people would tweet about exactly the same thing at the same moment, all put their attention onto one thing to show that there is a real movement behind it. The flaw in it was that it then went away. So once the tweet had happened, it disappeared into the ether and didn't really leave a trace. So I don't want this to be like a thunderclap. I want us to focus our energies and efforts and attention on this issue just for one morning, but also to share our ideas, to think really deeply, to ask difficult questions, to make new relationships, and then to use this on an ongoing basis to do something meaningful. So I'm going to rattle through a little bit of housekeeping, and then I'm going to hand straight over to our speakers who we've all been looking forward to hearing from. If at any point today you do experience any technical difficulties, you can let the Money and Mental Health team know in the event chat, which is on the right-hand side of your screen, or you can email contact@moneyandmentalhealth.org, and we will help you to sort those out. After our keynotes this morning, we're going to go straight into our first panel discussion, which is on how customers are using loopholes to get around gambling blocks and the ban on credit card gambling, and how we can address those loopholes together. There will then be a short break, And with my mental health hat on, I'm going to urge you in that short break not to check your emails. So make a cup of tea, stroke your cat if you've got one, open the window. It's, being at a conference online is often quite an intense experience for the full morning. So give yourself a little 10-minute break. Then we have a choice of 2 breakouts. So you can either join a breakout that's focused on how financial services firms can engage with people with lived experience of gambling harms to improve tools and support. Or at the same time, there will be a breakout session on the blurred boundaries between gambling, gaming, and crypto, and how firms and policymakers can respond. We will then have a short break after that, and then our final panel discussion is on how we can use data to ensure that gambling is affordable and that we can support those who are at risk of harm. The panel discussions and the keynotes will all take place here on the stage, which is where you are now. Well done, you've made it into the main auditorium. The 2 breakout sessions will take place in the sessions section of Hopin. So you will see that on the side menu. They won't be in there at the moment, but about 10 minutes before they're due to start, they will pop up and you can choose between the 2. So there's no need to pre-register. You can choose at the time which one you want to go into. All of our keynotes and main panel discussions are going to be recorded and available for playback, but the breakout sessions will not. They're designed to be more interactive, practical discussions and to allow for a more kind of free-flowing discussion. So feel free to ask difficult questions and bring up challenges that you're facing in there if you wouldn't want that to be recorded. Questions can be asked in all of the sessions via the chat function, apart from in the keynotes. We'll come to those in the panel discussion. We will get to as many questions as we can, so please keep them coming. A little plea from me to please avoid jargon if you can, both because everyone will understand what you mean. So it's better to keep it straightforward, but also because we are auto captioning this event to make it as accessible as possible. And the auto caption software may not be as familiar with the technicalities of gambling and machine learning as perhaps you are. So if we can use plain English, that will make it more accessible for everybody. Thank you. And finally, if you are tweeting today, please do tag us at MMHPI and use the hashtag GamblingCon21, and you can see other people who are taking part in the discussion on that chat as well, so you can be part of the wider discussion. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to our first keynote speakers. So I'm absolutely delighted that we have the Minister for Tech and the Digital Economy at the Department of Digital Culture, Media and Sport, Chris Philp, joining us this morning. Minister Philp was appointed as Parliamentary Undersecretary of State in DCMS in September. He was previously Parliamentary Undersecretary of State at the Home Office and the Ministry of Justice. And as Minister for Tech and the Economy, he's responsible for digital and tech policy, obviously, but also for online safety, international strategy, gambling and lotteries. So the perfect speaker to have here today. So I will hand over to you, Minister. Thank you for coming.
Wonderful. Well, Helen, thank you very much indeed for that introduction. And thank you as well for the fantastic work that Money and Mental Health has been doing in this area. It's really great to be with you here this morning. Look, I think you've been doing excellent work over the last 2 years, and this conference is a fantastic opportunity to reflect on the strides taken so far, but also to explore further areas where we can innovate in the interests of protecting people, particularly with gambling problems. I think this conference is a great opportunity to remind ourselves that we need to take a collaborative approach in tackling gambling-related harms. As Helen said in her introduction, there are a whole range of people who can work on this together: gambling operators, obviously the Gambling Commission, financial service providers, and where necessary, for people with really serious problems, the NHS as well. And I think by coming together at events like this to share knowledge and best practice, we can really make sure that the right measures are in place to help people who need help and prevent people getting into really serious difficulties with problem gambling. And now, as Helen said, I was appointed relatively recently, about 9 weeks ago, by the Prime Minister. I'm delighted to have moved to DCMS in my new role as Minister for Technology and the Digital Economy, which includes gambling. And clearly it is a critical moment for gambling policy. We have as an approach in government a view which I sort of strongly endorse, that we need to get the right balance in the way that we approach regulation of the gambling industry. Clearly, for millions of people, gambling is a completely legitimate leisure pursuit, and we respect the freedom of adults to choose how they spend their money. But it seems very clear to me that there are still, despite the work we've done, a small number of people, probably something like, well, there are various different estimates, but it could be about 1% of gamblers, which is something like maybe between 0.3 and 0.5% of the population, who have a really serious gambling addiction, which can devastate their lives. It can ultimately lead to suicide. It can certainly lead to bankruptcy, losing your home, and so on. And it, of course, affects very profoundly not just the individual, but their family as well. And that proportion of people I just mentioned is probably somewhere in the region of 100 to 300,000 people. So it is as a number, it is a significant number. And I think we collectively have to rise to the challenge of protecting those people whose lives are being devastated by gambling addiction. One of my first visits after taking on the gambling, or being given the gambling portfolio by the Prime Minister, was visiting an inspirational clinician called Dr. Matt Gaskell, who runs the NHS's Northern Gambling Clinic in Leeds, treating people who have the most severe forms of gambling addiction. And listening to what he said about his patients made it clear how important it is that we collectively act on this issue. Now, clearly, one of the critical elements of our actions will flow through the review of the Gambling Act, the 2005 Gambling Act. It's been in force now for 16 years. And we did a call for evidence, as I'm sure you know, a year or so, over a year ago, and we got 16,000 responses, which we're currently analysing, covering a whole range of issues like protecting people online, advertising, consumer redress, the regulator's powers. And in the relatively near future, and by which I mean the next few months, we'll be setting out, the government will publish a white paper which sets out our response to this Gambling Act review, and it's likely that further legislation may follow that. But it's very clear that even though this review process is currently ongoing, there are things we should be doing straight away. And it's good that today, I think, the Gambling Commission has released its interim evaluation on the ban on gambling with credit cards, introduced in April of 2020, stops people, or it adds friction rather, to people gambling with money that they've borrowed. And the Gambling Commission's evaluation indicates that ban on gambling with credit cards, which I strongly support, indicates the action is popular with consumers and has not resulted in any unintended adverse consequences. So I'm pleased by the Gambling Commission's findings on that, published this morning. Separately to that, the Advertising Standards Authority is looking at rules on the advertising content around gambling, and we expect the industry to shortly proceed to a trial of a data sharing solution to protect vulnerable people. So this is where gambling companies, operators share data between them about problem gamblers, so they can stop people with essentially a gambling addiction from gambling. I want to talk a bit more about data sharing later on. There was some debate about whether this would in some way infringe data protection rules, and the Information Commissioner delivered a ruling a few weeks ago making clear that it does not infringe data protection rules, which is entirely understandable and entirely unsurprising, because of course finance companies share data about consumers the whole time, so that comes as no surprise. And I now want the gambling industry to move forward very quickly with data sharing to make sure that the most vulnerable people are protected, by which I mean people with where a particular gambling company has data showing that someone has a gambling addiction, a problem. That data should be shared so the person does not then just jump to another. So firstly, the person is stopped gambling on that particular site or that particular operator, but then the data sharing means they won't be able to open up an account and gamble with other operators as well. That is really, really important. Just moving on and reflecting on the role that financial services have played in preventing gambling-related harm, I'm very glad that progress has been made. I know that in February 2019, the then Culture Secretary, Jeremy Wright, convened a roundtable and laid down a challenge to senior leaders from the financial sector to make the most of the opportunities that they have to prevent gambling harm. And I believe the gauntlet has been well and truly picked up by individual companies, finance companies, as well as collectively via UK finance. Based on a University of Bristol study, we estimate that around about 90% of UK current accounts now offer a gambling merchant code card blocking facility, very important, and even better, most now follow the best practice guidelines to ensure there are appropriate cooling off periods, giving individuals the space to reflect before returning to gambling. Many of the people activating these blocks are not necessarily disordered gamblers, but we have repeatedly heard from treatment providers and people with lived experience of the potentially life-saving benefits these blocks provide, especially when partnered with other self-exclusion tools like GamStop, where people can self-exclude from gambling. So I would like to just thank all of you who have invested time and energy in developing these critical tools to better serve your customers and critically protect that small number, but important number, who are at severe risk as a result of gambling addiction. I think we have a moral duty to look after those people who are at risk of all kinds of very serious harm, up to and including the risk of suicide. I would also like to highlight some of the other areas where financial service firms have really been helping. The first is that I know many retail banks have partnered with third sector gambling harm organisations, which has included specialist training for your customer support staff to make sure they have the skills to spot and talk about gambling disorder, and others like RBS have piloted opportunities to offer specialist treatment in branches. And I know most financial service firms do signpost vulnerable customers where you identify them to specialist support like GamCare. Secondly, I know a lot of work has been done to support research into gambling related harm, and I would like to particularly commend the Lloyds Banking Group, who worked with a team of researchers led by Dr. Naomi Muggleton, who analysed current account data from 6.5 million current accounts tracked over a period of 7 or 8 years, and they analysed in that very large data set the spending patterns of people amongst that 6.5 million customers, group over that 7 or 8 year period. And they, I've looked at the results. I'd strongly recommend that you look up Professor Muggleton's paper. It was published in a journal called Nature Human Behaviour, Volume 5, in March of this year. And it's very interesting in that it identifies that small but important cohort, the sort of 1% of gamblers whose gambling appears to be essentially out of control. And that cohort spend, that 1%, the sort of worst 1%, spend almost half of their expenditure is on gambling. And clearly having half your expenditure in a given month on gambling is, in anyone's sort of book, highly problematic. So that data was extremely illuminating, and just thank you to Lloyds Banking Group for that. It also, by the way, correlates with other forms of financial distress. So the same people that had very high levels of gambling problems also had other forms of credit problems like mortgage arrears or credit card arrears, and so on and so forth. I know also that Monzo and HSBC have worked with the Behavioural Insights team on their more recent publication, providing insights into how people gamble and the impact it has on their financial lives. So I'd just like to celebrate and thank the financial services sector for the work you have done with academia, government, and the charity sector. But I'm sure, of course, as always, there is more that can be done, and I will definitely be working with parliamentary groups, industry, charities, and so on to identify opportunities to go further. I'll be hosting a roundtable with the Economic Secretary to the Treasury, John Glenn, the City Minister, and financial service firms to discuss this very shortly. There's one area that I would just particularly like to highlight, and it comes back to the data sharing point I touched on earlier. So I think that clearly, and as actually I think we heard this in the introduction as well, so the two groups of organisations that have access to really detailed, granular data on who has gambling problems are gambling operators themselves, who will be setting up this data sharing platform, which is now being sort of blessed by the Information Commissioner's Office. But the other group of organisations that have this data are banks, of course, like as the Lloyds Banking Group data I referred to a second ago demonstrates. So I would also like to explore opportunities to have banks feeding in to this data sharing this data sharing platform that's being set up, and where banks looking at their own transaction data can see that someone has a really serious gambling problem, and obviously one has to define what parameters you use in raising that flag. I'd like to explore asking banks to feed in to this data sharing platform. So it's not just gambling companies providing data on people with a really serious gambling problem, it's banks as well. So we can essentially, that data can then be shared around the industry between gambling operators with the purpose in mind of essentially preventing that person from gambling with, whichever gambling company it may be. So I'd like to maybe that's a topic you can discuss later on today, but I'd like to just sort of open that up as a suggestion and an ask, which I'd be very interested in exploring further with the industry. Obviously, the Gambling Commission will continue to work with you as well, with the financial services sector, with credit reference agencies, because they also have a very important role to play here in flagging people who maybe are signing up to gambling websites or gambling operators who have credit problems, so we can make sure that where accounts get set up, that's done appropriately, and when a gambling company is not offering gambling accounts to people who are already in severe financial distress. So a couple of ideas there for some further work between us collectively going forward in the future. But look, certainly the government wants to continue working with you to encourage technical innovation, as well as obviously protecting people, as we said. The Gambling Act review is going to be critical, and again, I look forward to working with you on that and hearing your thoughts on the white paper when we publish it over the next few months. But let me just repeat what I said earlier, a huge sort of thank you to the work you've done so far in the financial services sector to support protecting some of the most vulnerable people in society, those people whose lives are potentially being devastated. So thank you for what you've done to help protect those people already, and I look forward to working with you collaboratively to do even more in the future. And look, I wish you well in the rest of the conference, a rival conference to COP, which are equally important, and I hope it's extremely productive.
Thank you very much, Minister, and thank you for taking the time to come and talk to us this morning. I know there are lots of people on the call who are looking forward to seeing and engaging with the white paper as well, so that's really, really helpful. I'm now going to hand over to our second keynote speaker, who I am absolutely delighted was able to join us this morning. We're going to talk to Rachel Edwards. So Rachel is a member of Money and Mental Health's research community. For those who don't know, that's a group of nearly 5,000 people who have experience of mental health problems, who feed into all of our work. Rachel has experience of mental health problems, but also of struggling with gambling, and she's previously used self-exclusion tools and gambling transaction blocks to control her gambling. Rather than asking Rachel to kind of stand up in front of her computer and give you a kind of download this morning, Rachel and I are just going to have a bit of a conversation to talk about her experiences. So thank you for coming, Rachel. It's lovely to see you again.
Hiya. Okay.
Hiya. So could you tell us a little bit about your experience of gambling and when you think it started to become problematic?
Well, I've always suffered with depression. It probably started a few years back, probably when I decided to come off my tablets because I thought I was well enough and I wasn't, and things started spiraling out of control. I didn't gamble for very long, I wouldn't have thought, a couple of months, but I knew things were getting out of control when spending used to go down quite quick. I never put a limit on myself because I thought, oh, I'd be all right, but was I wrong?
Thank you, Rachel. And you, this had an impact on your finances, didn't it? Would you be happy to tell us a little bit more about how that link between the gambling problems and the financial impact made you feel and the impact it had on your mental health?
Well, every time I was feeling low, I would gamble. And that was most of the time. So every time I felt like I needed a break away from something, I used to go on and gamble. The worst part for me was when they it's like suck you in type of thing, the gambling communities, because when they first offer you a promotional offer, you usually take that up. You win maybe like a couple of hundred, so then you're hooked then, and it's not a good thing at all.
And you ended up borrowing money to gamble, is that right?
Yes. Yes. When I came off my medication when I shouldn't have, I ended up having loans, running up a debt, and then part of that was used for my gambling as well.
And is there, I mean, would you have liked your bank to have stepped in to support you when you're experiencing that? What role do you think the bank could have played?
Well, at the moment, I know HSBC has got a slider which you slide up, but I don't think the slider should be there. I think it should be mandatory, because at the end of the day, a gambler is not going to slide that thing up to say, oh, I got a problem, when they want to carry on gambling. So I definitely think there shouldn't be a slider there.
So you would like a gambling block to be a default on your account, just there for everyone?
Yeah. Yes, I definitely think so, because it took me ages to find somewhere that could help me, like GamStop I used, but they were hard to find. The only place I looked on, I finally found somewhere, was on Money and Mental Health.
And would you have liked your bank to have reached out and offered other kinds of support? So maybe signposted you to charities or kind of other information about gambling?
Well, they did. They noticed that I was always in the red, which is hard to get out of. I can't think what they call it now for the banks. Overdraft, which is all well and good, but it's hard when you're trying to get out of it. They sent me a letter saying, you speak to Step Change, but they could have done more. You know, that's what they're there for, banks, and they should be helping you.
And how has it been since you discovered the kind of GamStop and the block on your cards?
It's been okay, but you can still type in the internet that you want to gamble on websites that exclude GamStop, and they do come up, which I think is wrong. All of them should be on there, not just the one.
And are you still able to gamble even though you've put the block on your cards as well?
You can, but I don't. I haven't for months now.
That's great news. I'm really pleased. And how are you doing at the moment?
I'm doing okay. Not very good with this lockdown. Well, hoping we're going to stay off the lockdown, but fingers crossed we have a good Christmas. My mental health is still bad, but other than that, I'm getting through it slowly. Life.
Sorry to hear about your mental health. I think we've definitely heard in our research that experiences of lockdown add so much pressure, but also make it harder for people to avoid gambling when you can't go out and do the other things that give you enjoyment in life as well. Is there anything else that you wanted to add or that you want to tell the people who are here today before we kind of move on to our other speakers?
No, any way I can help, by all means, I will, like, stop these gambling websites and stop them advertising on telly.
Thank you, Rachel. I think I should say we are incredibly fortunate to have Rachel and people like Rachel involved in our research, because Rachel's been involved at every stage of this piece of research and has been so generous with sharing her story and experiences. And in our sessions that we're going to go on to this morning, we've got one after this talking about circumnavigating those gambling blocks. So how even when the blocks are in place, people can get access to gambling, which will definitely address some of those points that you've raised, Rachel. And we also have a session in one of the breakouts later on about working with people with lived experience of gambling problems and how we can really make the most of those rich insights that are being shared. So I'm hopeful that that will help more firms to be involved with people like you as well, Rachel. So thank you so much. And yeah, we really appreciate you joining us this morning.
Thank you.
So I'm now going to hand over to Charles Randall, our final keynote speaker for this morning. I'm really delighted that you could join us, Charles. Charles is the chair of the Financial Conduct Authority and has been chair of that and as the subsidiary, the Payment Systems Regulator, since 2018. I'm not going to read out Charles's whole bio because that might delay the conference by a good 10 minutes or so. But safe to say that Charles's background in regulation, compliance, and also in law and academia is extremely impressive. But also we've been extremely fortunate to have Charles's support for a lot of our work at Money and Mental Health, particularly on our work to tackle gambling harms, where I know Charles has a particular passion. And I'm extremely grateful that you've taken so long out of your morning to be part of this conference, and also that you joined us last year as well. So it's very nice to have that continuity for the discussions. So I'm going to hand straight over to you, Charles. Thank you.
Well, Helen, thank you very much indeed, and a particular thanks to Rachel for sharing her personal experience with us. It's so powerful to hear from users by experts by experience in these circumstances. My father had to leave school age 14, and he went to work for an on-track bookmaker. And it certainly was possible for people back then to ruin their lives through gambling, but the risks of addictive gambling are so much bigger today. Online gaming exposes children to the gateway drugs of loot boxes and skins betting. Adults can gamble 24 hours a day in a variety of fast, repetitive, and highly addictive formats. And despite the harms of gambling, there are advertisements everywhere framing gambling in terms of healthy pastimes like sport, through television ads, kit sponsorship, and stadium naming rights. So what has this got to do with the organisations which I chair, the Financial Conduct Authority and the Payment Systems Regulator? There are three reasons why we want to work with others in this area to reduce the harm that people can suffer. First of all, as financial regulators, we're seeing gamified generations, bringing more and more gaming and gambling behaviour into the world that we regulate, and it can lead to people suffering harm from regulated financial activities, and it can lead to risk to regulated financial firms. Firms are increasingly exploiting the behaviours of these gamified generations. Trading apps use the techniques of gaming firms and gambling firms to stimulate their users to trade. Spread betting firms that we regulate target people to move from sports betting to financial spread betting. Regulated firms seek to make profits from crypto by tapping into the speculative urges of these gamified generations. And although we don't currently regulate a lot of the crypto activity, it poses risks, not just to the people who buy it, but also to the financial sectors we regulate. Secondly, we want financial markets to work well, and we want firms to provide an appropriate degree of protection for their customers. Giving customers the ability to put blocks on spending on gambling sites is a positive step forward in this agenda. It empowers people to make better choices and retain control when they may not otherwise have the power to change their behaviour. I'm pleased that around 60% of banks in the UK have implemented gambling blocks. We do expect all banks to demonstrate how they're taking extra steps to protect customers who show vulnerabilities like addictions. And thirdly, so much of the harm we see in gambling and gamified financial speculation is linked to the much broader question of online harms and online safety. We've said repeatedly that the law needs to change so that the huge power that online platforms have over people's lives is matched by responsibility. And we believe this requires changes in the law that go beyond what the government has so far proposed. Using debt to gamble can have catastrophic effects. That's why the Gambling Commission banned gambling with credit cards last year. Of course, Credit cards are not the only means of getting into debt, and there is the risk that this change means that some people will be drawn to using less traceable credits to fund their gambling. In 2020, we included addiction as a characteristic in our Financial Lives survey. It's important to say we didn't split out addictions to alcohol, drugs and gambling, but we did find that people with addictions were much more likely to use high-cost credit than adults with other vulnerabilities. So vigilance by lenders is really important. A number of lenders have established specialist support teams to identify and support customers with gambling addictions, and it's encouraging to see examples of firms removing suspected gambling addicts from credit marketing and ensuring applications for credit are referred for detailed checks, as well as making increasing efforts to signpost sources of help. Although there are clearly requirements to manage personal data appropriately, I'm excited that financial services and gambling companies have agreed to do more to explore sharing data about potentially vulnerable customers to help them take better control of their addictions. In all of these efforts, customers and their rights must come first. This is about giving customers the support they need, including the tools they want to control their own behaviour. My father saw his own father go bankrupt, and so despite my dad's early start as a bookies runner, he had a careful approach to both debt and gambling. But many people don't learn the lessons that he learned until it's too late. So I'm really pleased to be able to support events like today and the workshops that Money and Mental Health have run with UK Finance, the government, the Gambling Commission and the FCA to bring together the different actors who can play a role in reducing the harm from gambling. I like to think that my dad would be pleased too. The only way we'll tackle gambling harms is by continuing to work closely together. So thank you very much for your participation in today. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles. I have no doubt that your dad would be extremely pleased by the focus that's being given to this issue. It really feels like the change that's happened in a relatively short period of time between being an on-track bookmaker to being an online bookie is absolutely transformative and just highlights the scale of action and the pace at which we all need to act to keep up with the harms that are now possible. But that makes me even more pleased that we're all here today. And I'm going to keep this moving and move into our next panel discussion, because I know that there is also a real wealth of experience and insight in the virtual room, and I want to make sure that we can get into an opportunity to ask questions and have more of a discussion. On which note, we also have a poll for attendees. So whilst we're having our discussions, you can take a moment to give us a very quick insight into what you're thinking. So we're asking attendees what you think should be the most important next steps for financial services firms in reducing gambling harms. There's various options on there. Please do take a minute to vote, because we will be discussing the results towards the end of the conference later on.